There we go. Now we're cooking. And let me change my name. I apologize in advance for that. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Good afternoon. We're here. We're feeling good. Welcome to our Let's Talk program, Community Foundations, Cultivating Community Engagement. We are so glad you are here with us today to experience this with us together. So I want to tell you to be sure to visit our webpage, and I'll be adding links in the chat. Let's see here. This week, we're going to be celebrating community foundations in a very special way with engagement activities, learning opportunities, and super fun things to do with us. Today, we have a very, very special edition of our Let's Talk series, one that is relative and relevant to not just community foundations, but to all organizations looking to embrace community engagement. We are joined by very special guests from community foundations near and far. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a bit. I do want to tell you this is a moderated panel, and at the end, we'll incorporate time for Q&A. And thank you to those who have submitted questions ahead of time. We will get to those after the panel discussion as well. Please feel free to add questions as they come up, as our speakers are talking and giving their remarks. I want to share that as part of our commitment as a trusted partner and collaborator, your community foundation, this talk is part of the many ways to help build capacity for your organizations, going beyond the check, and that's reimagining our role as funder to help build a more just and equitable society. At the very center of what we do lies community engagement, and it's also in my job title. It's important for us to stay connected, and that allows us to respond to community needs and also foster positive transformations. We do recognize that our success is tied to our ability to actively engage and involve and collaborate with the communities that we are privileged to serve. And I'm sure that we all feel the same way on this call. I've recruited the time and talent of professionals who live out community engagement in their work every single day. And we're honored to have them share their insights, experiences, tips, tricks, and so much more. So thank you to all of our panelists for joining us this morning or this afternoon. We'll start with remarks from Mauricio Palma from Silicon Valley Community Foundation. And then we're going to go straight into Kiana Williams from Central New York Community Foundation. Mauricio?
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here with all of you and celebrating community foundations, really centering community in the conversation. So thank you, Gloria and George, for inviting us to be part of this conversation. In terms of sharing a little bit about myself, I'm the Director of Community Partnerships at Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and I worked for 18 years. My work has really evolved as the foundation has grown. I started primarily focused on education reform, managing many initiatives and special projects that were geared towards creating collaboration around specific challenges, creating opportunities for children and families, working engagement of families in those projects, and really focus more on leveraging relationships and building those partnerships than the grant-making part of the community foundation. Then I moved on to provide support in what came to be kind of like the research and development arm of the community foundation, where learning happened as we were implementing initiatives and special on issues that were not necessarily central to the work of the Community Foundation at the time, uh, looking at ways to support BIPOC-led organizations, ways to engage arts and creator sector in our community, and looking at ways in which to galvanize folks through civic participation to address the housing crisis in our. And all of those were not grant-making strategies, but community engagement strategies that we had developed to support various interests. And lately, I have been given the responsibility of continuing to do work around community partnerships, but also take a deeper dive on what we called our community actions program, where we provide support in the areas of arts, culture, look at issues of immigration, housing, look at issues related to health and the environment, neighborhoods and faith-based work. And we also take a closer look at issues related to community storytelling and local journalism. The work that we do was really inspired. I give you a little bit of background with a major transition that was facilitated at the Community Foundation starting in 2018, that ended in the beginning of 2020 before COVID. The transition under the leadership of our president, Nicole Taylor, really took a closer look at the relationship the Community Foundation had in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, our impact region. After hundreds of conversations throughout the course of a year, we learned a few things that are critical to the work that we do now and critical to this conversation. Community leaders that organize some of these forums around what they wanted to see their community foundation to be, underlined that community needed to be at the heart of the work that the Community Foundation did. That we need to figure out a way to engage donors in that conversation. When we take a look at the practices of folks that we support at the donor engagement end of the continuum of what we do, there's a great deal of support happening outside of our region. So centering community for community leaders meant that it was also important for us to help facilitate a connection and a transformative relationship with donors. The other piece that was underlined was that we needed to do a work with a race, equity, and social justice lens, that it was not enough really for us to be providing support around services that were highly needed in the community, but we needed to take a lens of action that helped us get closer to the policy and the challenges around policy that will generate greater in our community. So race, equity, and social justice is critical in the way that we do our work. And finally, given that less than 10% of philanthropic dollars are touching communities of color, it became critical for us to not perpetuate the inequities associated with that reality, but to help bridge that gap, creating a significant preference in our grant making for BIPOC-led organizations. And given who the BIPOC-led organizations are in our community, another layer of that commitment was to support small organizations. And small in our community is less than $1.5 million. So that's kind of the context that led to a decision that Nicole Taylor made as a consequence of all the community conversations that were taking place in 2019. She was wise in asking to identify leaders that were passionate enough about change and transformation in our community that would be willing to help the Community Foundation through the process of developing our strategic plan, and that will be committed enough to hang out with us beyond the strategic plan to bring about the implementation. and she asked me to help organize a pilot with 25 community leaders, BIPOC leaders that were committed to look at questions in our community across several different sectors. That group came to be known as the Community Advisory Council, and the Community Advisory Council now is made out of 22 BIPOC leaders. They've served over the course of 3 years already, and they've really put fire under our feet, as Nicole says, critical in the accountability, making sure that we are committed to those things that they indicated were critical for the kind of work that we do. I believe that the engagement that has been developed with the Community Advisory Council allow us to have an authentic presence in the community beyond doing work. Community is having an understanding and having a presence of the community. And there are many ways in which do that work. They also have helped us democratize the philanthropic practices that we have developed over the course of the past 3 years, not only being engaged in reviewing and making recommendations for the grant making that we do, but advising us on issues related to the language work, all the way to the kind of partnerships that need to be created in order for that presence to be dynamic and to be relevant to folks in the community. And finally, I would say that the Community Advisory Council are interested in really looking at ways in which the Community Foundation can be a platform. And this is critical for them and it's critical for us. Can we be a platform to increase local giving in our community beyond what the Community Foundation can do, because they realize that we have a limited set of resources. And we're looking at the grant making that happens over $2.7 billion, and to see that that money goes to approximately 6,000 organizations. But in San Mateo and Santa Clara County, the grant making that we do is about $10 million. That discrepancy calls for us to take a closer look at how do we increase local giving with the relationships that we have in the networks that we're a part of. And that's part of the work that the team that I'm connected with does. While I concentrate on partnerships with community organizations, there is a team member that focuses on partnerships with donors and corporations. There is a team member that focuses on partnerships with policymakers. And together, we're trying to bring to reality that dream, that promise of bringing community at the center of what we do and increasing our presence in a relevant manner across all sectors. And with that, I'll stop and continue to be present with you. I will need to leave, but Gloria can provide my information. If anyone is interested in continuing the conversation, by all means, reach out and we're there to serve you. So thank you. And thank you for allowing me to be part of this celebration and this conversation with you.
Absolutely, Mauricio. I can't tell you how honored we are to have you here. This was just one of those things where I just casted a net and then crossed my fingers, because the Silicon Valley Community Foundation is the largest community foundation in the world. So the whole earth, the world, like everywhere where there's land on earth, this is the largest community foundation. So it was just one of those things. I sent out a request, and Mauricio, you were just so generous in saying that you'll do it. So we really, really appreciate your knowledge, your insights, and all the information that you've shared with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to take it to Kiana Williams.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kiana Williams. I'm Program Officer, Community Engagement here at the Central New York Community Foundation. And what I would like to delve into today is a pilot program that we started last year, participatory budgeting, which is usually something that governments will do, but we wanted to take that on. So a quick overview of our foundation. We service Onondaga County, Madison, Cortland, Cayuga. We have about 400 million in assets, and we grant out about 20 million per year. Our biggest grant round is our community grants. And then we have 4 million in discretionary. So I look over our anti-poverty fund. I do our venture fund. We also have initiatives such as our lead prevention and our literacy. And we also have our Black Equity and Excellence Fund to address the inequities within our Black community. If you read the Lending Tree study recently, Syracuse is listed as the second worst city for Black people to live in. And that is something that we cannot stand with. So if you get a chance to reference that study, I would suggest you do that. Could we have the next slide? And so how I came about, I'm a product of our recent strategic plan. I'm still new to my role. I'm about 1.5 years in. I come to this from the other side, the nonprofit side. I worked in arts and I was a teacher, taught humanities for a while. So I used a lot of those connections over the years to help build up our community engagement plan. But we see it as a tapestry of different activities based on what you're trying to achieve. And if you look here, there's a variety of different things that we all use in order to do our community engagement, no matter what our size is. At the basis of it all is making sure that we're building those trusting relationships within our community, getting out of our offices and going into the community and doing that. Next slide, please. And so since my placement here at the foundation, we have been able to reach, and this is just the disaggregated data of our groups, about 1,865 individuals from 2022 to 2023. And this is from a variety of different community engagement strategies, from going to ball games, sitting on at listening sessions, showing up at tabling events, all kinds of strategies that we used in order to engage the community and get folks to know who we are, what we're about, but also to start developing partnerships rather than transactions. So that trust-based philanthropy approach. Could I get the next slide, please? And so these are just some of the events we were at. Housing fair, that's a big issue here in Syracuse. I think it's a big issue everywhere in the world. We went to the Haudenosaunee, whose land we are on. They were honored at our local Syracuse Mets game. We were at the Syracuse Police Department. We really just grabbed our table and we go to so many different places to have that one-to-one with residents and approximate leaders. And this was very instrumental in rolling out our participatory budgeting plan. If you could go to the next slide. And then the next. So we use participatory budgeting, which is a democratic process. It actually started in Porto Alegre in Brazil as a way to hold governments accountable and have more transparency around how funds are allocated. And so we thought, why don't we try doing this around an issue that our community is really grappling with? And one issue that we are struggling with here is lead poisoning. It disproportionately impacts Black and brown children, and we have a very old housing stock. So we were like, we're missing something. We need to be talking to the people who are living this. And so from those processes of community engagement, we got about 165 residents to come to 8 different sessions throughout the year. And they were able to brainstorm, co-design an RFP process, which then went out to our nonprofit partners. And we also brought in folks from the county, people from the city to talk about, lead prevention. But we centered our residents who had this lived experience. So affected families were able to share what they had to go through, solutions, ways that they had to navigate. And so through that, you can go to the next slide. We were able to galvanize people using our trusted messengers. We had tons of partners. We centered youth leadership in this process with our participatory budgeting. You'll see the picture up on the right. Those are some of our facilitators, young women who live in the community that were facilitating each of the tables. We use lots of media, social media, as well as a lot of press. So a lot of people were very interested in this citywide project that we put together. And you can just go to the next slide. And so what our residents told us they wanted to have return was the mobile testing unit. And even though that was something we could not do, we were able to leverage resources and relationships in order to encourage the county to bring the lead van back. And that is exactly what they did. They listened to the community. What we were able to do is bring partners into the room who had never worked together before. We broke down a lot of silos in that, as everyone can be very, proprietary in the work that they're doing. And so this kind of leveraged partnerships and brought people to the table who had never even thought about working together before. And so these are the percentages of the most voted on ideas from our residents: messaging and social media campaign to raise awareness around lead prevention, testing housing units. They wanted lead ambassador programs, and of course the mobile testing unit. You can go to the next slide. And so we use the Stanford University PB voting platform, which is completely free. They design it for you. We offered the ballots in Spanish and in English. If I had my stuff together, we would have offered it in Kiswahili and a bunch of other languages if I had more time to get the interpreters. But we were able to do this. We got about 482 people from the city to come and vote. All you had to do was be 16 years old and live within the city of Syracuse to place your vote. And we broke it down according to the zip codes. A lot of these zip codes are where we have the high risk of lead poisoning. So it was really great to galvanize residents around that issue. And then you can go to the next slide. And then our community voted for the Sankofa Reproductive Health and Healing organization, and they received the 150K towards creating a lead prevention in their doula care services. This is something no one thought to do here. You know, even before the baby is born, you now are reaching that pregnant person and you're giving them the knowledge that they need to prevent their child from being lead poisoned. And so they've rolled out the work. They're doing some amazing stuff currently. You can go to the next slide. I'm zipping over this real quickly, but I wanted to touch on this as a strategy for community engagement. And do we have time to play this real quickly? We did this is just our trailer of a documentary of the process. And I just thought this would be great to share with you. And I hope the audio works. And if it doesn't, then we can skip that. Is it taking you to another screen, Gloria? Yeah. And then you can use those arrows to make it bigger. Yeah. And I hope you can hear the audio.
Syracuse is a really old city. And a lot of Northeast cities struggle with old housing that isn't full here.
I think the audio is a little weird.
Oh,
My twins was affected with that poison back.
can you hear? You can't
It's a
hear?
little better.
Now I'm learning that it's gonna affect the brain. Maybe they're gonna be able to reach the guys.
Yeah, I think the audio is cutting out.
This lead issue is a social, economic, and mental.
It's impossible to know.
So I'll put the link.
Yeah, you
in the
can
chat.
put it in there. Yeah, I don't think that it's working too well, but we
Okay.
enlisted the Black Cup Productions to do a documentary on the process. The full film will be screened this coming summer when we have the announcement with our new CEO who will be coming on board. But I share all this to say that we took a risk. There was a lot of lessons learned. There were a lot of partners that we worked with. More importantly, we centered the voices of our community and brought them to the table to understand, but you can go to the next slide, to understand better how we could be creating solutions to this problem that is affecting our community. Gaining that public trust is very vital to the work of community engagement, and getting out there into the community and doing your one-to-ones and talking to people and trying to understand what their lived experience is, and then leveraging what I do here at the foundation in terms of providing grant funding and partnerships. And so not only do we do grants, but we also provide capacity support for a lot of the grassroots groups that were a part of this process to support their work as well. And it was data driven. We had a lot of measurable results, and we were able to basically achieve something that our city and our local government always has decades long struggled with. And we were able to achieve something within that 1 year time span that no one thought to do before. And it took a lot of partnerships, but I was very pleasantly surprised because it's an organic process, it's a democratic process, it's messy, and you just have to be willing to get messy if you want to work towards solutions that haven't been thought of before, and center your residents as partners and not as people who are just coming to get services or coming to look for a grant. You have to switch and orient your thinking in a different way. And sometimes I think being new to this world, philanthropy, we can get kind of stuck in how we're seeing that. And I just kind of using a different, fresh perspective and listening to people, making sure that we are centering those lived experiences, because that's where you're going to find the solutions. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kiana. Each day we're all dedicated to advancing community engagement as it remains central to all of our missions and purpose for everyone on this call. And I honor your commitment to the process, Kiana. I love the community engagement tapestry that you shared. I thought that was really cool. And I'm really sad that the video didn't work, but hopefully the link that I included in the chat, that worked for you all to visit. So we'll now hear from George Ferrari, CEO of the Community Foundation of Tompkins County. He'll talk a bit about how to involve the community in decision-making practices, such as grant making and strategic planning, and provide examples. George, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks very much. I want to thank my fellow panelists. I have to say I've been in this field for a number of years now, since 2005, and I've always worked in the mission-driven sector, which is what I call it instead of not-for-profit. I like describing what we are, not what we're not. But the most collegial, creative, supportive, sharing, encouraging people work in community foundations universally, and I always find it very inspiring and positive and optimistic. So I want to thank each one of you for being on the panel. I want to thank everyone for attending this this conversation, which is an ongoing conversation. This is not a hit it and quit it kind of thing. Community engagement is a forever commitment, and community foundations are in their forever business. So we have to be thinking about how we can engage communities. We may not even be able to imagine 20, 30, 50 years from now what those communities are and what those needs might be. But our next generations depend upon us having a generational viewpoint, both forward and backward, not just focusing on the here and the now. It's really, really important. So I want to make a few comments and remarks about the concept of community engagement, and then give you some examples of what we as a young, small community foundation serving a relatively small population base are thinking about this. And part of how we're able to think about this is that it's universally embraced and supported and expressed in all of our staff and in all of our board and all of our volunteers. It's part of who we are and how we talk about what it is that we do. And part of it is to understand a few things about the context of this work. We are doing work in the context of communities, plural, that experience some of the same conditions and circumstances very, very, very differently. That's why it's important to disaggregate data. That's why it's important to have an ongoing commitment to diversity and inclusion, because the conversations must be informed by the rich differences that we have in a way that's supportive of sharing what that means and what those experiences are. And we are also doing this in the context of existing systems of inclusion and control and wealth accumulation, right? Philanthropy is a really weird word. People have strong reactions to it, how we think about it, how we define it, how we refurbish it such that it can be more just and more equitable as part of the work of community foundations. We exist in philanthropy in that public charity sector, along with things like United Ways and United Federated Jewish Appeals. And people think about us because we have the word foundation in our name, like private foundations. And we have some very strong differences. There are some parallels and similarities, but some very strong differences that make the concept of community engagement core to who we are, or at least who I think we should be in the work that we do. So our work exists in the context of racism and sexism and capitalism that causes people not to have the basic resources they need to thrive and survive. So I think we need to be conscious and aware of that when we think about community engagement. I also think that community engagement, if we perceive ourselves as separate or distinct or at arm's length from the community, we're lost, right? We are part of the community. We need to live and exist and recruit and hire and keep our doors open and engaged with a sense that we are part of the community. We are in the community in many ways. What we do is a role. It's not an identity. We have multiple identities. When I'm not at work, I'm not the CEO of the community foundation. Many folks in the community don't understand that distinction, but I'm a grandfather, I'm a husband, I'm a resident of this quirky place called Ithaca, and it's important for us to understand we have a multiplicity of identities. Gloria often mentions she has many hats to wear, and I love different hats to wear and to be really clear about when I'm wearing which hat. I think it's really important to conceptualize that when we think about community engagement. We're not separate from. We exist because of and for and with an alliance and partnership and solidarity with the community. And sometimes philanthropy has perceived ourselves as separate from the community or acting on the community as an object rather than a collaborator or a co-discoverer. I think we need to be very conscious of that because it's very easy to slip into that mindset even when we don't intend to do that. I like to describe philanthropy as the voluntary contribution of 6 resources, each of which begin with T, that we all have and that we all need and that we all can magnify and aggregate together to solve what's going on. And 3 of them are classically talked about and people understand them at some level, and that's time, talent, and treasure. And in different parts of our life, we have different access to each one of those. But they're all valuable. And the size or the amount of those resources contributed in community and solidarity with our community doesn't matter. What matters is that we're working together and understanding what's going on. The 3 other T's that aren't as often talked about, but I think are more valuable in terms of the social capital on our statement of financial position, our ties, our relationships with each other across time, distance, and difference. Trust, our ability to understand that when I say something, I mean what I say, and I'm going to do what I do. And we have integrity and responsibility and reliability and dependability with each other. And accountability. You can't really do community engagement without being open to being held accountable by one's communities. And the 6th one is testimony. And that's where we really embed this concept of diversity, equity, inclusion, and racial justice. We need to understand that people have lived experience, valuable information, sometimes often disregarded or not respected properly, that needs to be part of how we come together as a community to address and to solve those issues. So if we think of philanthropy as that, and not as accumulated wealth from old dead white men who abuse the environment and employees to raise that money, that's a bit of a stereotype, but you know what I'm saying. I do think that we can have a community engagement informed understanding of what philanthropy is. And our role as a community foundation is to do 4 functions with 3 resources to make our communities more equitable and more just. What are those 4 functions? We acquire, we steward, we analyze, and we circulate. We take in, we take good care of, we learn from, and we share 3 kinds of resources. Money is only one of those resources. Often people think of it as an ATM, right? Got to figure out how to get money out of the foundation. Once I get the money, I'll walk away. No. We're really interested in what you're doing. We want to understand what the problems are, how you define what the solutions are. So informational resources, needs, best practices, what your lived experience tells us about what's going on. And then social capital or relational resources or reputational resources. Those, if we share and take those in and learn from them with our entire community, we have a much better opportunity to solve big problems like housing and racial inequity and wealth disparity and income issues. And we do it in a process that builds capacity within the communities to be able to solve their own problems in partnership with what we do. So we have great grant review panels created by Gloria. We have an amazing board that includes volunteers. We engage with other local funders. We think very carefully about what we do and conceptualize what we do, not as an agent that works on the community, but as a partner and a tools kit and resources that everyone in our community has access to. And we have to be humble and accountable and accessible and learn from our mistakes and make things happen in positive, good ways in terms of community enrichment and community engagement. So thank you very much for listening to that somewhat philosophical, conceptual groundwork. That's how we think about what we do. And thanks to Gloria for pulling this group together.
Thank you, George. time, talent, treasure, and the additional 3, ties, trust, and testimony. Thank you for that, George. And the other thing that stuck with me is what we do as community foundations: acquire, steward, analyze, and circulate. So now we're going to hear from John. John is going to talk to us about data and metrics and tell us the story of community engagement and inclusive board development. Following John is going to be Caitlin. She's going to round us out with what the future has in store for community engagement and what it'll look like. So John, take it away.
Well, thank you, George. Thank you, Gloria, so much for having me. Thank you. It's good to see everybody. Happy Tuesday. You know, as I listened to the first 3 speakers, I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm like hanging out with some amazing people, experts, just so inspired what everyone else does. And yeah, just happy to be with you. So I'm the president and CEO of the Community Foundation for the Greater Capital Region. Yup, we're over in Albany, that crazy place that people read about in the paper or see on the news. Really interesting place, very, very complex, very diverse. And I'm just going to fly through some slides here. So let's go to the next slide. And we're going to go to the next slide. I'm just going to keep saying next. Next, you already seen this stuff. This is an interesting thing we put together just to help people understand everything we do at the foundation. And I think it'll resonate with other foundations. We're not just, you know, a funder. Obviously, we provide resources and ideas about connecting to other resources, but we're also a strategist. We're a convener. And sometimes we're even a backbone organization to different groups. And so it's just a multi-layered role that we have the privilege of doing in the community. So next. Some of you have seen this too. This was put out by Ekstrom Consultants a few years ago. And again, this is another way of sort of visualizing all the things that community foundations do. And we always talk about, you know, hey, we have all these transactional things we do, like we make grants or we're managing donor advised funds or agency funds. But our passion, our goal, and we have to do that perfectly, by the way. We have to do it perfectly, can't ever make a mistake. And we're all good at that. But our heart, our passion, I think, for most of us in the mission forward organizations are, you know, we want to be transformational, right? We want to do things that are going to last. We want to impact systems. We want to be a blessing to the community and hopefully be led by the community. So next. I'm going to keep, yeah, there you go. The little star. This is just a little snapshot of the kind of the churn or the activity. So over the last 7 years, and I did 7 years just because I've been here 7 years. So obviously, you know, there's a lot of activity, stuff coming in and money going out, and you know, creating new funds, honoring donors and supporting their wishes, the things that they'd like to do, and then also listening carefully to what the community is saying about what we should be giving to. Next. I don't know how many of you follow CF Leads or you might be a member, but this was a very influential report. If you haven't seen it, it's worth looking at. And we embarked on a strategic planning process last year. We were informed by this. We were already insisting on racial equity, but it reinforced it. And we've been learning from so many friends about this. The whole concept, which you heard today already from everyone, amplifying community voice, taking a back seat, being a good listener, not a good talker, all these types of things. And then obviously the thing that we talk about a lot, we talk about it in Albany, and we need a lot of change here, is influencing public policy and systems if we're going to see lasting, sustained change. Next. Next, I'm just going to move through a couple of these. Next. Yeah, so our strategic framework, I just want to tell a quick story here. Right in the middle, right in the center, you see This is our framework: elevate community. We will strengthen and expand people's impact on their community through partnership, convening, grant making, and service. We were in a board meeting and we've been working very hard on the strategic plan. And what was in the center there was a very different perspective. The perspective that we were wrestling with was a passion to, in quote, lead change. Foundations want to lead change. And we talked about it, and one of our board members who represents one of the, really underrepresented groups in our community raised his hand, took a big risk, raised his hand, and he said, I think you have it all wrong. Yes, I understand you want to lead change and you want to have influence and make really good grants and you want to do wonderful things, but he literally, and he brought 20 of us plus our staff to tears. He said, what we really want to do is elevate community. And it transformed everything for us at the foundation. So I'm just gonna, and these other two things, obviously, we want to inspire more giving, right? More generous people, inspire philanthropy. And of course, we would like to strengthen our core so that we can serve, be more effective in our service to the community. Next. And there's just another way of showing how these are interdependent goals for us. Next. And we'll give you all these slides, by the way. So this is just my definition of growing social capital. It's thoughtful and purposeful actions we take to build trusting, joyful, valuable friendships and connections with diverse people to help us all make a more just and prosperous community. So it's not about zero sum. It's not about all these other things that the world's chasing. It's about building a place where we all feel valued and connected and we're all prospering together. And now I'm going to touch on a couple of things that we're doing. So right in the center here, these are some of the things that we do, and many of you do so many of these and so much more. But one of the things we did was the Catalyst for Change Leadership Program. Next slide. Yeah, so this actually 5 years ago, we partnered with UAlbany and we did a pretty extensive survey. And one of the observations, actually it was 6 years ago, we noticed that there was a lack of representation on nonprofit boards. And it's still an issue across the country. All of our communities is how do we best make sure that our boards and our leadership structures are representing the communities that we serve. So we did this survey. 3 things came out of it: qualify individuals from underrepresented identities. This is what people told us. Match and connect people with, with diverse communities, and then create a welcoming space on boards, which means helping boards get out of the rut and think differently about how their practices, everything from recruiting to onboarding, training, and helping people feel and know that they belong and have a very strong voice on their board. Next. So we have this amazing group. It's our IDEA committee, and it's the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Action Committee. People that I've befriended through the years. And I just have to say, Gloria, one of your questions to us as panelists was, what does community engagement mean to you and why is it important for a community foundation? And one of the things I think I've learned and I'm pretty passionate about is that community engagement is personal. It's never delegated. I'm the president and CEO, but I am very intentional. I go out and I meet people and I introduce myself. I show up, I attend, I help. If I can, just be present. I listen, I learn, and I try to give, I try to connect. I try to be maybe not just an ally, but maybe something more in the community. So I think that's what it takes. And this is just a wonderful picture of this year's Catalyst. This is a group that has come together, and they came with a passion to serve the community. And they wanted to serve on a nonprofit board, but they've expressed, gee, we don't know anybody who would maybe even think about us as serving on their board. and they've agreed to like kind of go through this process together. It's a 10-week process where we're just together, we're learning together. I actually took this picture, so I'm with them every week, and we're all learning together about what's going on in the community. What is it? What are the legal and other ramifications of being a board member, fiduciary responsibility, duty of loyalty, care. We're learning about diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging, all these concepts that are so important. We're learning about change management, conflict resolution. How do we, how do we transform systems and some of these structures that have harmed our communities for so many years? Next. And Brenda Badham is just one example, one story. She's become a wonderful friend. She went through Catalyst 2 years ago, and she's now on our board of directors, and she was teaching Catalysts about board governance and about the responsibilities of being on a board. By the way, it's an amazing presentation. She did a great job. So she's just one example, and we have, let's see, 28 graduates that have gone through, and just amazing people. And this is one small thing that we can do. Next. I've included, this is a picture of our board. Next. We're doing a lot and these are just resources if you're interested in building social capital, why it's important, and especially with a lens of inclusion. Next. And I'll just stop here. I don't know if you've heard of some of these entities, but there are some amazing groups that are doing some really good work out there across the country. And we don't have time to go into them. But again, these resources are there. If you have any questions about how we're celebrating our community, raising our region, some of the awards that we're doing, anything else, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John, so much. Lots and lots of information, and you did breeze past a lot of it, but all of these slides will be available on our website later today. We'll be posting it. So we're going to jump into Caitlin's presentation. Caitlin, take it away.
I'm sitting here smiling like, oh, that's me. So forgot to unmute. But thank you all so much for including me in this conversation. It really is an honor to be part of it and to represent the Community Foundation of Elmira Corning and the work that we do and how we engage our community. So we are a small community foundation in the Finger Lakes region of New York. You can see the image there. We cover about 4 counties right on the PA border. Next slide, please. And this is a picture of our team. We're a pretty small team. There's actually 6.5 of us. And I mention a half because you have to credit Penny Lane, our philanthrocat. We adopted her from the SPCA. She's a big part of the foundation here. And she's not pictured, but I'm sure she'll pop into the screen at some point during this presentation. We're fortunate to have a lot of unrestricted dollars. Randy Hewitt, our president, she'll start conversations with donors with the question, what type of legacy do you want to leave? Or what are some things that you're passionate about? That way, as someone who's in the field of philanthropy, working with all of the nonprofits, we can steer that conversation into a more broader conclusion to have that flexibility to adapt to the change in our world and the changing needs of our community. My position here, I work on scholarships and youth philanthropy. And whenever I work with youth, I define philanthropy, and we actually at the foundation define philanthropy as the love of humanity. We really base all of the work that we do in the love of humankind and how can we show love in many different ways. So when I talk to students, I tell them that philanthropy is giving your time, talent, or treasure to make the world a better place. And sometimes, especially working with youth, we focus on that time and talent because we at the foundation, we have access to that treasure. So connecting those dollars to the hearts of our young people in the community really helps kind of connect with that group of people. If you could give to the next slide. And this is our youth philanthropy programming. It is my favorite part of my job here, and I'm showing you 3 parts of it. We try to be a touch point of philanthropy from students as young as elementary school all the way through their high school experience, hoping that by the time they get to high school and they see that there's scholarships from the Community Foundation, we already have that relationship with them. Our elementary school visits are my favorite thing ever. We've created a 20-minute lesson where we teach students the word philanthropy, what it means, and they get to become philanthropists for the day. Meaning I bring $100 grant with me and a big check, and that gets the kids jazzed. You always have a student raising their hand, oh, you could give this $100 to me so I can buy more video games. And it always opens the conversation in a fun way. And then we get to talk about, okay, as philanthropists, we do handle a lot of wants of our community, like those video games, like playgrounds. And we also handle and work with the community needs. So we go through a lesson where the students actually get to vote to become human service philanthropists or cultural philanthropists, identifying those needs or wants within our community. And then once we narrow it down to one, we'll connect to a nonprofit organization that provides that need or that want. I'll send the grant to the organization, and then they will actually send the thank you note to the classroom. So we talk to the students about how every grant tells a story, and this one tells the story about your love of supporting animals in our community, and how do we do that. So that's our classroom visits. The next step is, and the touch point is at the middle school. We'll do after school programming, and I'll really piggyback off of a lot of the after school programs that are within the middle schools already. Many of them have a community service requirement that they need to fulfill in order to keep their state funding or to have within the program. So we'll go in and provide that. This is a little unstructured because it is that after school time. So you really want the students to have fun and respond to what's going on in the school that day. So we spend a lot of time building relationships among each other within the group, and then talking about and identifying issues in the community, in the school community that the students want to support, and then they figure out a way that we can do that, write up a grant to support that project or program, and they'll get to do that throughout the time together. And then lastly is our high school program, our Roses Youth Philanthropists. These are a group of high school students from about 5 or 6 local area schools, and we meet regularly throughout the school year, again, to identify issues within the community and the passions that the students have, and how we can make an impact or a change to make the world better for students in our region. With Roses Youth Philanthropists, they actually have a $12,000 grant cycle that they get to run. So they'll accept grants within the year, and if there's a focus that they want to look at within those grants, we can put that as a priority for those grant requests. And the students are reading, reviewing, and making those grants throughout the year. So it's a really fun, engaging experience to talk to students and ask them what they see and how they want to make the world better through their eyes. If we could go to the next slide, Gloria, thank you. So a big piece of this too, the reason we are able to do a lot of the work that we do is a big credit to the technology that we use. We utilize a software company called Foundant Technologies, and I don't know, I'm seeing some head bobs. Hopefully lots of Foundant fans in here. We love them. They have fully integrated our applications, our financial and our banking software, which in turn has severely saved us tons of time to go out into the classrooms and into the nonprofits to kind of work with folks. So when I talk about streamlined software, our applications are no longer self-select, meaning scholarship applications, students will fill out an eligibility quiz that will then kind of spit them out into applications they are eligible for. So saving time, making it easier to access those applications that way. I want to speak to those designated feedback spaces because those are everywhere. We're constantly looking for ways to see how students are using our software, our grant makers, our grant panelists. So we put survey links in emails after you submit an application. We have follow-up forms that are assigned to scholarship or grant approvals that ask the individual, how do you want to remain involved? And with that, including a lot of options for that. Are you interested in answering a survey? Do you want to be a grant panelist? Do you want to mentor a student? Do you want to be an ambassador? It's been a fun way to collect information, but also a great way to give options to the people in our community to engage in a big or a small way that they enjoy. In the bottom, you can see we use email and text. Text has been such a great way to engage with our students who are within our programs, within applying to scholarships. And it's the way to go. They'll check their email, but I've learned they're not always responding to their emails. But they're responding to text, especially if there's a deadline along within that text message. It's a no pressure, more casual way to interact with the students, which I've found great success in. And I've really enjoyed talking to students in that manner. Using the data that we collect from Fountain, we have reports pulling demographic information from our area, from students who are submitting applications, not completing applications. And then we run those reports annually to see where there are gaps in the applicant pool, where there are gaps in our funding. Are we making sure that every group of students, of people in our region have access to the services that we provide, and who's using it and how can we reach them? That data has been a pivotal piece of really looking ahead into the next year. How can we make it better? And then lastly, I want to speak to the workshops. These are, I've found the best way to collect feedback. It's that unstructured time. I can ask all of the questions that I want on a survey, but I'm not really understanding how students are filling out these applications until I'm sitting there with them. Last year, I got a lot of students in their applications that are writing, hey, hi, my name is first name, last name. Thank you for considering my application, first name, last name. And I realized through a workshop, because there is a form on the registration that says salutation. So explaining to the students, making sure that we can adjust the software to how students are using it, how they're seeing it. Those questions come up a lot easier when you're working side by side with someone, and it's a great informal way to build those relationships with the people who you're reaching. It creates that feedback loop for everyone involved. So those guidance and school counselors, the students, parents, recipients of scholarships, and on the grant side, the grant panelists, the nonprofit leaders, continually keeping in that conversation through different touch points and through different channels is how we've found the most engagement. And if we could go to our next slide. I want to quick speak to how we've used social media to spread the word about our scholarships. We started a scholarship ambassador program in 2020 during COVID when we couldn't really get into the schools, they were shut down. So we created a social media campaign where we partnered with previous recipients, class accounts, and school accounts on Instagram to help post on our behalf through their voices during a time frame that scholarships were open. So the students in the class accounts, they would receive money in exchange for their services, but they really got to use their voice to share the importance of scholarships, or tell their story to their friends. And that really helped kind of boost our social media engagement to the folks that we were trying to reach. During that campaign, I'll run a ton of giveaways and fun things on our Instagram story. But that's been a really great way to engage the youth voice, and share information about the scholarships. We could go to the last slide, Gloria. So oops, sorry,
Oh, no.
well, I can start chatting about them. It's just my key takeaways. I've loved our youth philanthropy programs because the students crave making an impact, and they love to be participants in that philanthropy in a way that they get to control. Their ideas are fresh and fun, and putting that youth voice at the grant table has been really a special way to see change in our community. Feedback has been our most valuable tool, both the structured and unstructured feedback. I had mentioned those workshops, and it helps us to understand how to make our programs work for the people who are using them. Social media, using it toward the audience we're trying to reach. So using the voices of the people who benefit from the programs, me rather than sharing, have them share and tell their story. And then letting the technology do the work for you, really finding ways to streamline that technology has saved us a ton of time so that we can go out into the community and work together with our organizations and our students to make our community better. So thank you so much for letting me share a little bit about what we do at our foundation.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Caitlin, that was a wealth of information. I really love looking at the photos of those children. Oh my God, those smiling faces. Thank you so much for that. We're going to quickly move into our moderated discussion, and we realize that this is it's a lengthy program, it's a robust program, lots of information. If you need to hop off, we totally understand. The recording will be available on our website. If you need to just go grab a cup of water, you need a bio break, whatever it is, please feel free to do that. But we're going to move right into our moderated portion. And the first question I have goes to John. John, could you describe any challenges or obstacles you've encountered in your efforts to cultivate community engagement, and how have you addressed them?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I could take this in so many different directions. I was thinking one of the challenges with being a funder is that sometimes funders can fall into a mindset where they lose their we lose our objectivity. So I think remaining objective, being open to feedback has been crucial to us. And I've heard that through Caitlin, your presentation, the feedback loops, the surveys, the one-on-ones, meeting with people and saying, hey, what do you think about who we are, what we're doing, and how effective we are has been critical to us. The challenge of, and this is true for all funders, of fighting self-importance, thinking that somehow philanthropy is going to solve these issues, and when that we're seeing, and they're multifaceted. They're going to take all sectors of civil society to change some of these things. So I think that's important. Don't think that you're going to be able to do this on your own. And very practically, I'm turning 60 next year. I had one of our catalysts who's just become a wonderful friend, and they've said, "Well, John, you're an old white guy." And so just, I think, knowing ourselves, what our frame of reference is, and what our implicit bias might be. And I think we need to do some soul searching as funders. We all have implicit bias. What is ours? And so, read, listen, address any bias, the privilege that we might be coming from, fight all those zero-sum ideas that are out there. Taking a page from Heather McGee, The Sum of Us, which is a fantastic book. And I think on the positive side, think about how we can impact systems, leadership structures, policies, anything that will take away from the impact of what we're trying to do with our grant programs, and the changes we're hoping to see.
Thank you so much. It's certainly not easy to overcome or navigate challenges or obstacles. And the hope is, of course, to foster community engagement. So I brought these several community foundations together to uncover shared themes and possible synergies. So my next question is for George. George, are there opportunities for collaboration or knowledge sharing between community foundations of different sizes to collectively enhance community engagement efforts?
Thank you, Gloria, for that question. There are a lot of opportunities, not the least of which is to be maintaining respectful conversations and connections with our colleagues. As I said before, it's a very collegial field. So everything from the Council on Foundations, which is a national organization that brings together all sorts of different funding entities. We particularly like NCRP, the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy, is another group. Grant Makers for Effective Organizations is another group. There's a CEO Net for those of us who are insane enough to be in these CEO jobs, and we stay connected with each other. And there's a listserv. There's always a question that goes out, and all these answers that come back, along with other people saying, "Yeah, I want to know the answer to that too." And I was just going to post this, and I want to figure out what you're all doing on this. There are organizations such as the New York Funders Alliance, which is a statewide group of funding entities. We just had our conference up in Syracuse back last month in October. It's always very valuable to come together like that. And there's also one other group that is more for mission-driven organizations, inclusive of philanthropic entities. I happen to serve on the board of the New York Council of Not-for-Profits, NICON. So I'll put a link in the chat to a page from our website that lists some of those affiliations. And as I look at this, I think that we need to update this a little bit as well. The last group, John, you mentioned, which is CF Leads, and I just was able to get to their national meeting last month as well. And I was very, very impressed by that organization bringing together community foundations that are looking at the convening, catalyzing community engagement space. It was very, very stimulating. So lots of sharing. And it's also important for us to hear from people that aren't part of the great, vast, philanthropic industrial complex. We need input inside the bubble too.
Inside the bubble, I like that, George, thanks. So one such opportunity is, of course, peer learning events such as this, co-discovery and co-creating, where community foundations can share their experiences, successes, and lessons learned, can foster a culture of continuous learning and improvement. And speaking of learning, the next question is for Kiana, Caitlin, and John. What advice or lessons learned would you share with other community foundations or organizations, agencies, other mission-driven organizations looking to enhance their community engagement efforts regardless of their size? And we're asking for actionable steps. We'll start with Kiana.
Sure. Thank you, Gloria. And I'm just really glad to be on this panel. I forgot to say that earlier, so I don't want to forget. I would say, and again, my caveat is I'm still new to this, but one of the important strategies is making sure that you're building opportunities to get out into the communities that you're trying to build relationships with. You're not going to do that from your office. And so showing up, supporting, whether you're going to a nonprofit's event, making those connections is really important in tearing down the silos. A lot of times we know that our nonprofits are, at their optimum, especially when they're in sectors that are trying to improve the quality of life for people. And so they're trying to keep the lights on. So we need to go to them as much as we possibly can, and or build opportunities to have focus groups or, small listening sessions, whether that's through virtual, or if you can break bread and have food and meet in person to talk about issues that are within the community. I think those are really important opportunities. Doesn't have to be super huge or big, but let's say your initiative, you're talking about housing, and you want to bring people together around that. Bring a couple of folks that are a mix of nonprofits and residents. You're not going to get all the answers from your nonprofits. And so it's really important to try to build those relationships with the people who have those lived experiences. So inviting them in or going to them is definitely a really solid strategy. And you don't have to be a big organization to do that. You can create those opportunities.
I love that. Thank you, Kiana. Tearing down those silos. That's what we all aspire to do. Caitlin?
Excellent. Yeah. One lesson that we have learned is not to use the same strategies year after year, because we found that we were reaching the same people year after year. So Kiana, you had mentioned going into organizations and volunteering. We have some great partnerships and relationships with certain nonprofits. And then at the start of each year, we said, okay, who can we visit this year that we haven't seen in a while? It's really important to broaden who you're seeing, because going to the same people is easy, and it'll produce the same results. So making sure that you're challenging yourself, that you're looking at the ways that you have approached people, shared information, and change it up. For our scholarships, I realized I was just sending information to school counselors. So I was just getting the same students who would apply, and those are the students that are walking into the school counseling office, asking for those opportunities. But once I started to send them to youth centers, to English teachers, I was working with a different group of students. So that was really important to at the beginning of each year assess how we did it last year and switch it up.
Thank you, Caitlin. Switch it up and keep them guessing. Definitely love that strategy. John, you want to add anything?
Sure. Yeah. Just fantastic advice. Kiana, I appreciate what you shared just about really being engaged and shaking things up. It's so important. I think one of the things that we've done is we have this Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Action Committee that are wonderful leaders that have helped kind of govern and guide our work. They helped us build out an inclusion roadmap. It's like a 90-page document that helps nonprofit boards be more thoughtful and inclusive in their, and there's just tons of ideas, brainstorms, strategies to be thoughtful and more inclusive in practices. And in other words, shaking everything up with how you do board, right? So that's out there. And then we did a board inclusion series, just shaking things up, so that board leaders were ready now to maybe think about receiving new up and coming leaders. And we also created an alumni catalyst alumni. Now we have 28 alumni, and they're, reporting all sorts of cool outcomes. So we have metrics of what's changed in their lives that we track. And the alumni now helps us with outreach, and we're building kind of a network that's just growing and expanding and multiplying in ways that are just way beyond anything we did. It's them. They're leading now, and they actually choose the future catalysts. So it's just, I think it's anything you can do we can do to be supportive of one another, and then in so many ways get out of the way and let things just fly.
I love that. That's amazing advice. Get out of the way and let it work itself out. Our next question is for Caitlin. Caitlin, what do you envision for the future of community engagement within community foundations or other mission-aligned organizations? And how will your foundation continue to evolve in this area?
Awesome. I love this question because we are big picture thinkers. We're constantly talking about what our future looks like. How can we make it perfect? So for me, and I think us here at the Foundation of Elmira Corning, is community engagement looks fun, and I never have to send a survey again, because you have those relationships in the community where you've done the work and you've gone out into the nonprofits, and now people are coming to you naturally. You've broken down the barriers, because we know in foundation work there is that power dynamic. But if you can really make it fun and engaging by being there at the organizations, by showing the importance, by literally putting your money where your mouth is, and working together, that then it won't be hard work. That community engagement will come to you. And a way that we plan to do that and continue to do that is by constantly investing our time. When we are off the clock, we're volunteering in organizations, or on the weekends we're going together to participate in a fundraiser for an organization. Not only does that help support the nonprofit, but it also helps build our team identity, where we can really have some fun together and support the causes that we're passionate about.
I love that, building your team identity together. That's very, very important. So we're going to transition into the questions that were sent to us ahead of time. And if our audience has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. If not, I am going to read just maybe 2 questions that was submitted to us in advance. The first one is, how can we bring communities together rather than segmenting them? We celebrate diversity, but we may also create echo chambers for different political, ethnic, religious groups. How do we honor differences while supporting collaboration for the common good to bring people together? Who would like to answer that question?
Just go ahead, John. I'll follow you.
I was just going to say, one thing we did was we kind of we had a celebration of philanthropy that we did for many years, and we kind of shook it up and reimagined it, and we turned it into Raise the Region event. And we've very purposely over the last 2 or 3 years focused on celebrating others and not focusing on ourselves. Just like whenever we see something cool happening, we like try to celebrate it. And at the celebration of philanthropy, we honored some up and coming leaders that maybe weren't getting recognized in our broader community and region. And it was an awesome experience. And we had just a wonderful group of, I think we had well over 400 people who attended that. So that was something we did.
I love how you're shaking everything up, John. I got to go visit you in Albany and figure out how you're doing that and bring it back to Ithaca. I think sometimes the way the question is worded, I wonder, when people ask, how can we bring communities together rather than segmenting them? I think sometimes the greater goal of inclusion and equity requires a stop along the way at creating safe spaces for people with shared lived experiences to be able to process and talk about those in ways that they don't have to defend or explain to someone who has not had that shared experience. And I think that's a very valuable methodology that occasionally gets judged as divisive when in many ways it's a means to an ultimate end of truer connection across differences and a respect of lived experiences which are different. So I would just offer that in this work, excuse me, of community engagement, we can do things in a lot of different ways. And some of the ways we need to start where we're at and move forward. And some of the ways that we do that, it needs to be respectful of people's experiences and creating spaces where deeper exploration can happen before the next step is able to happen. So I just want to kind of mark that in response to your question. Honor differences while supporting collaboration, I think, is by not asking people to default into one homogenized identity, position, space, and assimilate. I think we've talked before about, are we a melting pot or are we a salad bowl where every distinct ingredient is part of the bigger group, but maintains its identity and isn't homogenized to one thing. I think that's an important dynamic we haven't really spoken too much about, but I think it can be valuable when we're talking about community engagement.
Thank you, George. Starting where we're at and moving forward. I like that. So our next question is, there are some great messages in Heather McGee's The Sum of Us, What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. How can these be helpful to getting at root causes? And how can philanthropy make a difference in societal change? Who would like to answer that question? We have John.
I'll jump in. Oh my goodness, we could take days and talk about this, and we should. Yeah, I think it's just creating spaces. I think one of the amazing things about that I've learned about the catalysts is that we bring people together in a safe space and allow them to share openly what they've experienced, and it having a mixed, I understand the idea of, having groups with similar lived experiences. You have to have that support. You have to, and then also figuring out ways to mix and mingle so that others can learn and others can share, and not go limbic brain on each other, right? Because if we go into limbic trauma, if we make or react, we make decisions or react out of our pain or everything else, we know what happens, right? We're seeing examples of it all over the world. If we can help each other be in a safe and a resilient place, then we can then be creative and change things that are unjust and causing harm. And so I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I think I'm just personally so excited when we can create these little things that we do with youth and philanthropy, or with this whole way of, community making decisions about grants, Kiana, that you're doing. I mean, those little things are transformative in people's lives, and it brings people together. And I'm just so excited we get to do a little tiny bit of that with Catalyst as well.
I love that. Thank you, John. Your passion and commitment definitely does come through when you are speaking on these issues. Does anyone else want to add to that? Okay. Our next question, there are two questions that kind of go hand in hand, and it's probably more for Caitlin, I'm going to say. How can we get effective input from our patrons? We've tried surveys, but have not gotten many responses. How do we reach segments of our community that don't typically attend our events and programs? And then the other question is, how do we create more interest in our communities with doing volunteer work? Who would like to answer that? I'm gonna volunteer, Caitlin, because you seem pretty well-versed in surveying.
Yeah, no, I'll just quick speak to that. We send a lot of surveys as well. I think those are a great structured way to receive feedback. And we will, this sounds bad, sometimes with the surveys, I'll bribe students to answer. Sometimes they can win a gift card to Target or Starbucks. So putting those surveys out there is important. And but another way is through sitting down, and I think we've all mentioned being there with the folks in some way. That feedback helps us to ask the questions that we're not asking, especially for those who fill out our grant applications or scholarship applications. That's how we'll do it here at the foundation. And I forgot the second part of it, but I can let someone else answer.
How to create more interest in communities doing volunteer work. So how to get volunteers, recruit volunteers.
One thing that we've done is we've made opportunities to by getting a bus to get to the volunteer position together, or really breaking down all of the barriers that might exist for somebody to participate in a volunteer opportunity. If it's childcare, we'll provide childcare during that time, making sure that you assess, okay, what are the reasons that people may not be able to volunteer, and kind of providing a fix for that, or a solution is one way to kind of gain the interest, I think.
Very good. Thank you, Caitlin. Kiana, you want to add something?
Yeah, I want to add, I think part of that question, the word patrons, I think even just reframing your language in general, not seeing people as patrons, but as partners, and approaching it that way, and beginning those conversations with, people who you're trying to reach. So if they're the approximate leaders who are dealing with housing or dealing with food justice, reaching folks in that way and bringing them in as partners and co-designers. So if you're trying to reach a larger segment of that particular group, you want to get them to tell you what you should be doing, because who would know best besides the people who are immersed in that space. I know I met Caitlin, thank you for mentioning removing barriers. With our PB project, we always provided dinner, we always provided childcare and activities for the kids, so that parents could engage within the meetings and, be able to participate without having to worry about, oh, I got to feed the kids, I have to, do this, they're coming after work. And stipends, I find, are very useful to engage people. If you have it in your budget and you're trying to pull together a listening session or a focus group, and you have a stipend or a gift card, as Caitlin mentioned, I think those are great ways also to show people that you value their time and their input and their talent, and because they're a treasure. And if we approach it like that, I think you're going to find more people are going to want to engage.
Thanks so much for that addition, Kiana. Showing people that you value them and you honor their time is really, really important. And incentivizing, removing barriers, that's also very, very important. So being mindful of time, it's now 1:29. I want to thank everyone who has joined us, who participated, who stuck with us for the entire hour and a half. Thank you so much. Thank you to my panel. I value and honor your time and your talent and your insights and your experience. This is something that's very important to us, and we lean into collaboration and connection and relationship building, because that's what philanthropy is. It's relational, not transactional. So we'd love to continue these conversations at another time. Thank you all so much for joining. This recording will be available on our website. If anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat. It's gcoicou@cftompkins.org. And again, I thank you all for joining, and that will be the end of our, oh, wait, I'm sorry, we have a question.
Yeah, tomorrow. I'm asking you tomorrow, are you still doing your giveaway thing?
Yes, Bags of Grace. Yes, we are still doing Bags of Grace. Please join us for Bags of Grace in the office at 10 a.m.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ira. Everyone, take care. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take good care, everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you all.